This is the lecture for Tuesday, the 21st of September, 2021 for European history. At the very beginning of class.
Definitely at the beginning of class.
So, in the late Middle Ages, though intended to work hand in glove, church and state were in a state of conflict. And that was only one of the problems that the church faced. Remember, the Christian church in the West is the one thing that survived the fall of Western Roman Empire. The Christian church in the West is the mote of dust around which the entire civilization of the West cohered. Western civilization in the Middle Ages is Christendom. It is so important that people are not considered to be part of the West until they are converted to Christianity. This is true of the Vikings, it is true of the Magyars, it was true of the Lombards before, and it's true of the Cumans afterwards. These groups that come out of Central Asia or the North and act as barbarians around the edge of the Christian West, all to one extent or another, including the Lithuanians and the Prus, are converted to Christianity and thus join our Western civilization. So that's how important it is. Now, when the Russians convert to Christianity, they don't convert to Latin Christianity, they convert to Greek Orthodox Christianity. By the way, this has another effect, which you can see anytime you look at a Russian train or a Russian newspaper, a Russian library, or a Russian movie with subtitles. What is a byproduct of the Ruses of Muscovy's choice to embrace Eastern Orthodox Christianity rather than Latin Western Christianity? Yeah.
They took up the Cyrillic alphabet.
They took up the Cyrillic alphabet. That's right. As a result, you see Greek letters, so the USSR is listed as CCCP to a Western eye, but it is definitely USSR for the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, which I used to know in Russian, Sovietskoy Soyuz or something like that. Can you help?
Sovietsky Soyuz.
Sovietsky Soyuz. Okay, for Soviet Union. Okay, thank you. You both. So, let's see. In the Western Church, you have the heart of Western civilization in Western Europe. Did I say Western enough yet? But the Pope's Church is beset, first of all, by ongoing conflicts with the kings and the Holy Roman Emperor. And the conflict in the Holy Roman Empire between Guelphs and Ghibellines, between followers of the Pope and of the Emperor, weaken both in the long run. Secondly, there is the trauma of the Black Death, which the Church cannot protect people from. Now, God never promised the faithful and easy life. In fact, when people asked Jesus, can we follow you? Jesus said to them, take up your cross, which is not metaphorical. It is not entirely symbolic. It means that you are taking up a burden of suffering that a person who does not follow Jesus doesn't have. But the horror of the Black Death is enough to shake a lot of people's faith. Look, regarding death, we all die. That's a natural part of our existence. Whether we're afraid of it or resigned to it or we're looking forward to it, we're all going to die. That is something that sooner or later we accept or we fight, and either way it happens. However, the thought of no one remembering what that flag represents, of no one but archaeologists, maybe some ancient linguists having any clue what the English language means, the thought of Shakespeare being lost, or Tolkien, Or Frank Herbert, since Dune is finally coming out. The thought that everything that you know and value will at some point be dust, forgotten, is one of those things that make people quake with some form of existential terror. One of the reasons why I absolutely insist that if our species does not go into space soon, we're lost. Well, part of it is I think that without the frontier, we get cabin fever. I think our society becomes soft and decadent. Not that that's happened since 1969. But more than that, sooner or later, something will happen to the Earth's climate. Sudden, dramatic, global thermonuclear war, perhaps, or a cometary impact, perhaps, or an asteroid impact, perhaps, or the wrong kind of solar flare eruption, perhaps. The switching of the Earth's magnetic field, which will happen. Some other form of climate change which could induce a rapid ice age. Massive volcanic eruptions that could blot out the sun. And ultimately, the sun itself will expand to nova form, and the surface of the sun will expand out almost to the orbit of Earth, and the Earth, along with the other inner planets, will be destroyed. The only hope that we have, not only of preserving our genetic heritage, but of preserving Shakespeare and John Wayne and J.R.R. Tolkien and the memory of Jesus Christ and Tolstoy and all of the other people who have made legacies that make the world a place worth living in. All of that will be lost unless we go to the stars. All of it will have been for nothing in the sense of an ongoing present world. So just keep that in mind the next time you're talking about how useful space exploration may be. When the faith of people is challenged, a new form of intense mysticism takes root. Thomas à Kempis, who is a Roman Catholic saint, wrote a book called The Imitation of Christ. And in The Imitation of Christ, St. Thomas à Kempis talks about living an inward devotion. A devotion that is very personal, that does not involve necessarily gathering en masse and worshiping communally, but rather living a life in reference to Jesus. The modern variant and slogan of à Kempis's idea is, what would Jesus do? You're in a situation, you ask yourself, WWJD, what would Jesus do? And you try to guide and shape your choices based on your faith. À Kempis's version had appeal because it was something that anyone could do. If you can read about it, but other people might read it to you. It is something that you can personally do. It may not prevent you from getting the disease. It may not prevent your village from being despoiled by troops, enemy troops or your own. They're both just as bad almost. But it gives you a way of meeting the day without despair, without giving in to hopelessness. And that is something that people needed. Another thing that comes out of this new piety is the example of Francis of Assisi, who becomes also a Roman Catholic saint, St. Francis of Assisi, who the current Pope is named himself after, Pope Francis. St. Francis was a gentleman who lived a life of devotion where he personally turned aside, like the Good Samaritan, to notice the suffering around him. Now, when you get older, and perhaps you've already observed this, if you're in a city like New York or Seattle, and you see homeless people on the street or somebody in pain or suffering, you will notice people going around them, not intervening, not interacting. A, it's normal. B, They're dangerous. You try helping a stranger in the city, they're just as likely to knife and rob you. Seriously, don't do that. I'm from New York. There are criminals who are like trapdoor spiders. Oh, oh, oh. And you rubes from the country. Oh, can I help you? Yeah, you can give me all your money. As they brandish a weapon. It happens. However, if you're on a country road and your car breaks down, and it's real country, people will stop. That's something I noticed when I moved from the New York area to Maine. In Maine, which is a rural state in the northeastern United States, my car broke down, and 3 guys stopped to give me a hand. They didn't know me. They didn't take my stuff. They were helping out. My wife's car was washed almost off the road in a sudden flash flood, and a guy helped her who had a pickup truck and really good engine, and he helped push her out of the trough that had the water in it. Saved her, saved the car. Didn't ask for anything. She thanked him. Turning aside when you encounter suffering is something that Jesus extolled. He said it was a part of being a Christian. But most of us don't do that. And part of the reason is that suffering surrounds us. That you could spend your entire life helping people, and it wouldn't make a difference on the big scale. What Francis says is, I don't care. I don't care if it makes a difference on the large scale. I see suffering, I do something. This even includes birds with broken wings. The man stopped and healed birds by splinting their wings and keeping them until they healed. His example, he came from a life of privilege, gave all that up, ended up wearing basically a burlap sack with a rope belt. I don't know if he wore sandals or not. Lived in absolute simplicity, And he lived a life of dedicated service, to the point where others wanted to join him in this. And the Franciscan Order of Friars was founded on the basis of St. Francis of Assisi's example, where people don't necessarily become priests. A friar is not a priest. And a friar isn't even necessarily a monk, like the old Benedictine monks in the early Middle Ages. A friar is somebody who has given up material wealth, material status, in order to be helpful to people who are suffering. In modern times, there was a woman who did this in Calcutta, India. She was from Eastern Europe. She went to one of the most horrible places on earth, one of the poorest neighborhoods in all of the cities of India, Calcutta. And in India, there are still the echoes of the caste system, where people are born higher and lower class, just like everywhere else. But the Hindu religion says that those who are born of upper caste, have cleansed souls. Souls that are noticeably closer to the angels than everyday people. And people at the bottom of the social order have dirty souls. Untouchables is what they are called. Fit only to handle the dead and carrion. Untouchables because no decent person would even come close enough to touch them because they are so foul. And the idea is that their souls, it's not their circumstances, it's not that they were born into poverty, it's not that you feel compassion for the poor even if you can't do anything. According to Hindu belief, these people deserve it because in previous lives they made horrible choices that brought suffering to others, so they deserve to suffer. And if they suffer as they should, in the next life they will be born higher in the chain of being. So what that meant was that in these Indian cities in Calcutta where Mother Teresa was, she didn't see people having compassion for the poor. So what she did is she found those who were dying and comforted them. Some of them healed, most of them didn't, but they didn't die alone. Other women joined her, and she founded an order of Catholic nuns whose job it is to go to places in the world where no one wants to go. Not necessarily Christian places. Most of the people who Mother Teresa helped were Hindus. Some were Buddhists, some were Parsis. Some might have been Muslims. Very few would be Christians. That wasn't the point. What would Jesus do? Jesus would offer help. What would St. Francis do? St. Francis would turn aside from what he is doing and be the Good Samaritan. Mother Teresa of Calcutta was that change, was that merciful person who did not let people die alone. And her followers still continue, and either she has or she is in the process of being canonized a Roman Catholic saint. Do you know, Pius, if she's been made a saint?
I don't know.
Okay. Do any of you know if she's been made a saint yet? When she died, the crowds in Rome shouted the same thing they shouted when Pope John Paul II died. Sancto subito. Sainthood now. Sancto subito. And John Paul, because he was instrumental in the fall of the Soviet Union and in freeing Eastern Europe from communism. I don't think John Paul has been made a saint. But that is probably in the process, and it probably will happen at some point. So you have a new order, the Franciscan Friars, who are dedicated to personal service. Humble service, service without status. They don't have any monasteries, they don't have wealth. They have their willingness to intervene on the side of life, on the side of mercy, on the side of compassion. And this becomes a picture of what people crave in the aftermath of the Black Death. You also have St. Dominic, who founded the Order of Preachers, what we know today as the black and white robed Dominican Order of Preachers. And what Dominic says is that the false teachings of the Cathari during the Albigensian Crusade are a direct result of poor religious education, of people not understanding theology. So Dominic's order is an order of teachers designed to teach the church's orthodox doctrine, to explain it to people who have gone astray. And the Holy Inquisition, the church's theological court, was established to correct people who had made theological errors. Now, after Dominic's time, the Inquisition becomes synonymous with terror and torture and death. That had not happened yet. That was a distortion of Dominic's vision. Dominic saw the Inquisition as a corrective, a teaching agency, not an agency of oppression and punishment. And one of the greatest disciples of Dominic was the greatest philosopher of the Western world in the late Middle Ages, St. Thomas Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas' vision of Roman Catholicism was up to Vatican Council II in the early 1960s, the dominant philosophy within the Roman Catholic Church. And even post-early 1960s, post-Vatican Council II, Thomism, the philosophies of Thomas Aquinas, are resistant to the notions of liberation theology and other fusions of Marx and Christian teachings, which the Church has since become more open to. So this new piety appeals to people. Going on pilgrimage is something that you can do to do a devotional act. So when you read Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, you're going to be reading, if you haven't already, you will be reading the stories of English pilgrims going from all over England to Canterbury, which is the Archbishop's seat and also a place where there are holy relics. All sorts of people personally go on pilgrimage. That's something that today not many Christians do. Not in the West anyway. However, the church has problems. One of the problems is that none of these devotions particularly strengthen the church. The second is that the Pope, more than anyone else, the Pope is responsible for looking at the general health of Western civilization. And what he sees is a civilization fractured by constant warfare, constant conflict. So the Pope promulgates Unam Sanctum, a papal bull. Unam Sanctum is a declaration of papal supremacy over royal power by the Pope. Had Unam Sanctum become real, all the kings of Europe and the emperor, the Holy Roman Emperor, would have understood that when they undergo their coronation rite, when they kneel down and are anointed with holy chrism, holy oil, that they were not only taking an oath to God to rule in a Christian fashion, but they were taking an oath to admit the church's influence on interpreting what it meant to rule in a Christian fashion. In other words, the Pope would be an authority of last resort. If the king made a law that you thought was bad, unjust, you could appeal to the church, and the church might convince the king to abandon or reinterpret that law. Unam Sanctum was an attempt by the Roman pontiff, by Pontifex Maximus, the source of all rivers, by the Roman Pope, the Bishop of Rome, to establish the church and the Pope as an authority across the entire Christian region, at least of Western Christianity, of Latin Christianity, that would make the kings of Europe less willing to go into constant wars with one another, and more willing to see the Christian world as a unified body. Yes, composed of a confederation of nations, but a unified body. Since the Pope already inspired crusades and Catholic leagues again in the struggle against the Islamic civilizations of the Middle East, how much better a job we could do if Christendom did more than give lip service to the example of Christ and to the service of his church. So what this is an early variant of the European Union that the Pope is proposing under the auspices of the Western Christian or Roman Catholic or Latin Church. Now, of course, like at Canossa, when the Pope forced the Holy Roman Emperor to kneel in the snow and say, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa, I'm sorry, it's all my fault. Unam Sanctum and Canossa didn't last. The victory of the Pope over the Emperor at Canossa lasted but a few years. And the pretensions of the Pope are opposed actively, overtly, subtly, and quietly by every royal in Europe, because the Pope threatened their power within their realm. And the way that the state, the way that the monarchs always interpreted things, was that God gave me this realm in which to rule in his name. Not the Pope, me. The church is here to help me, not to supervise me. It also didn't help when the King of France captured the popes and in a proverbial Babylonian captivity, kept the popes under French tutelage and French rule from 1305 to 1377. And then, in 1378, Other rulers in Europe decided, well, if the French king can have his own pulpit, so can we. As such, other kings brought other popes to the fore, and we have the Great Schism from 1378 to 1415. And in this Great Schism, at one time, there were no less than 8 popes. 8. And these 8 popes called the other 7 anti-pope and anti-Christ. Now, calling someone anti-Christ is about as bad as it can get when you're a Christian levying curses on someone. Calling someone anti-Christ is the equivalent to calling them Satan's chief agent, the son of Satan on earth, Satan being the adversary. In the end, after constant religious war between the popes, which weakened the papacy further in relation to the kings, everyone agreed by 1415 this is not working. So, church councils are set up at Lake Constance in Switzerland. And this church council is a council of cardinals and bishops from all over Europe. All of the current popes that are in competition resign. There is a new conclave, which means to lock in the bishops and There is a new conclave, which means to lock in the cardinals of the Roman Catholic Church. Cardinals are bishops plus. They are princes of the church. Cardinals elect the new pope in conclave, which means they are locked in. And they're locked into a building, usually the Sistine Chapel. In modern times, they're locked in so that nobody can affect or pressure them or bribe them or blackmail them into voting a particular way. Conclave, they are locked in so that they can make themselves the best choice for the Christian faith by hopefully choosing, inspired by God, the next pontiff. So the Council of Constance and others bring about the end of the Great Schism. Now there's a problem for the Pope. The new popes, who are post-Great Schism, have to deal with the concept of church councils becoming the dominant force within Christendom rather than the Pope. After all, if the Great Council of Constance would end the Great Schism, what does that mean for papal authority? Could a church council, in fact, negate papal decisions, rewrite canon law, which is the law of the Christian faith as seen by the Roman Catholic Church? Could the popes... I'm going to trust that you'll stop soon.
I stopped and then I started again.
Yeah, well, you know what you need to do. If popes can be overridden by church councils, then the papal pretense that God has a special relationship with the Bishop of Rome would be shaken. If a church council is in fact superior to the Pope in religious or teaching or theological authority or wisdom, then the Pope is merely another bishop. Or he's like an Eastern patriarch who is somewhat supreme except for the emperor. The Pope would be somewhat supreme except for church councils. So in the throughout the rest of the 1400s, especially in the mid-1400s, the popes made absolutely sure that everything they did weakened and undermined the Conciliar Movement. And the Conciliar Movement is a movement that said, you know what? It would be better if we had church councils instead of the Pope. It would be better if the church was restructured so that the Bishop of Rome was not a priest king. It would be better. The popes, along with tradition, were able to grind this conciliar idea down so that it no longer threatened the papacy by the time we get to the end of the 1400s. A way, by the way, of describing this new piety or this personal approach to religion is called mysticism. Mysticism is a non-theological, non-rational approach to religion. It's an intuitive approach to religious faith, mysticism. Mysticism asserts, and there are thousands and thousands of different types of mysticism within all of the great religions. There's Islamic mystics include the Sufi mystics. Mysticism is the belief that God speaks to you not only through your rational mind, not only through your conscious mind, but through your intuition, through your insights. And therefore, that it behooves you to make time in your life to listen to God. Maybe do the rosary. Maybe read the Bible, if you can read, and if you have a Bible. Not many people did. Maybe you pray in front of a saint, with a saint, intercede with God on your behalf. But you make personal time in your life. Maybe you go on a pilgrimage, you make personal time. So we come back to this notion of a personal encounter with God. Any questions regarding the changes in the church before I get to the final change? The final change, I don't see any questions. The final change is this. The Roman Catholic Church, ultimately, because of the Albigensian Crusades and other events like that, becomes hidebound, hardened, inflexible, and resistant to change. Innovative ideas, creative approaches to theology, novel ways of interpreting Scripture, all are seen as a threat by the Roman Catholic hierarchy to their authority, as something that could usher in a new Albigensian crusade, or something that could usher in a new schism, or a new Avignon papacy, something that could replace the church with the Pope with a church council, something that could draw the people and their loyalty away. Again and again, as the 1400s proceed towards the 1500s, the church is presented with would-be reformers. One of them is the man who wrote, or who took a part in trying to write the first English-language Bible. His name was John Wycliffe. And Wycliffe preached a reformist version of Christianity. And his idea was by translating the Vulgate, the Latin Bible that the church used, into English, it could be more useful to everyday people. The church saw Wycliffe as making a direct attack on them by reinterpreting the Vulgate, the Latin Bible. Wycliffe could change the meaning of Scripture. And in doing that, Wycliffe could create, ladies, if it's distracting me, it's distracting. Wycliffe could create a plausible rebellion that could change, split, or bring down the Roman Catholic Church. So they burn Wycliffe at the stake as a heretic, as a speaker of heresies, of religious falsehoods. Now, before you think, oh, the church, it's so brutal, it's so afraid, it's so nasty, I will point out that the one time they didn't properly suppress a creative religious person was with Martin Luther. And what Martin Luther did was Humpty Dumptify Western Christianity by dropping it off the wall and shattering it. And to this day, the Western Christian Church, which had been in general terms unified, has never reunified. We now have Catholics, we have Protestants like Lutherans and Anglicans, we have Reformed Christians like Presbyterians, Congregationalists, Methodists, Wesleyans. We have Baptist-oriented Christians, Anabaptists, Quakers, and Shakers, all forms of charismatic fundamentalist Christians. There are I can't name the variants that come from the Western Christian Church. And Luther's division started it all. So from a Roman Catholic perspective, not suppressing Luther was one of the great failures in that it caused Christianity to war upon itself. And in warring upon itself, ushered in 150 years of ongoing religious war between Catholics, Protestants, and Reformed Christians.
So with the Catholic Church, like after that little split thing, so one of the main reasons a lot of people followed Luther was because they figured that the Bible, without the extra books that are in the Catholic Bible, was more biblical because all of those books were written before a certain period of time. And so a lot of people were like, well, this looks a little bit more biblical. That's why a lot of people...
No, I understand that. And I understand, look, I was raised Roman Catholic. I still love the Roman Catholic Church. I really do, especially the old church before Vatican II. But I am personally a Reformed Christian because my own conversion did happen. It was a real conversion. So I understand many Protestant arguments against it. But what Catholics would argue is that had Luther been a more patient fellow, he might have actually succeeded not at splitting the church, but at reforming it, at bringing out some of the problems that the church had and having the church realize that being steadfast against all reform was suicide. But we don't know what happened. We don't know what happened because Luther was many things. Patient was not one of them. He had to temper, and we're going to see that when we go deeper into it. It's just, what I'm saying is that the church, the heart of Western civilization, has these problems, and it chooses to deal with these problems by a resistant reactionary tendency, a tendency to react against all forms of innovation, which is a way of killing something. Ultimately, the church itself at the Council of Trent, we'll talk more about this later, admits that it was flawed in Luther's time and tries to reform, but that's closing the barn door after all the animals escape.
And the opposed views, I think in 13...
Are you talking about the colloquy at Marburg?
Yeah. Listening, or not listening, but reading how short-tempered he was. He got about one line in before he was like, I give up, you're dumb, you're stupid. And they both just kind of like...
Yeah, it happens. And we'll be dealing with that. I may even have it be read aloud in class just because it's fun to see students take the drama of the scene. Okay. The other things that you need to know, because we will probably be having a quiz on the late Middle Ages tomorrow, is that in addition to a shaky church, we have the development of a new intellectualism that leads to, among other things, St. Thomas Aquinas' philosophies, which rationalize and organize a lot of Roman Catholic and Christian thought. But we also have Occam's razor. Now, do any of you know what Occam's razor is, you students of science? You people who will make Mr. McCormick cry if you don't know what Occam's razor is? Or Mr. Sabatke? What is Occam? Come on.
Yeah, it's technically their fault.
Occam's razor is a basic bit of knowledge that you all should know, so write this down. Next to Occam's razor in your notes, which is item F3. F3, Occam's razor. It is a basic principle of logic that's useful in science. It says that given a variety of possible solutions to a problem, the simplest is probably true. Given a variety of possible solutions to a problem, comma, the simplest is probably true, period. Given a variety of solutions to a problem, the simplest is probably true. That's Occam's razor. Occam's razor rests on the notion that the universe is straightforward about things, is not needlessly complicated when it doesn't have to be. And Occam's razor can help scientists make a quick and dirty assessment of whether a hypothesis or a theory makes sense on the basis of its elegance. I'm going to say that again because you may not be listening. Scientists can use Occam's razor, so can lawyers, by the way, to assess hypotheses and theories based on their elegance. Elegant simplicity is at the heart of the principle of Occam's razor. If you have two solutions, one of which contorts the truth and relies on so many subsets of data that you need an expert to lead you through it, and the other, which has a general principle applied here in a fairly straightforward fashion, the elegant solution is the straightforward and simple one.
Yeah, that's one of the justifications for like string theory, as opposed to these other theories, is that it's just so elegant that it must be true.
Yeah, and I tend to think that there is truth in it. It just hasn't been found yet, in part because we allowed the frickin' Hadron Collider to be built in Lucerne, Switzerland, and not the United States, which it should have been. And in the 90s, we had it planned to be built here, but no! Sorry, that along with us not having a spacecraft is one of the things that, many things that irritates me. Okay, so Occam's razor. I've shown you some Giotto stuff. In terms of military affairs, we have gunpowder introduced by the Mongols at the Battle of the Sejo River, where they beat the Hungarians and then go back home to determine who the next new Khan is. The Mongols used gunpowder in the form, it'll be a what? In the form of fireworks, in the form of rockets. Europeans take this Asiatic invention of charcoal, saltpeter, and sulfur, and make the first handguns, the first cannons. Gunpowder weapons are going to revolutionize warfare. Imagine the power of a longbow, but you don't need a lifetime of training to master the weapon. Most people can learn to use a gunpowder firearm in an afternoon. Now, the first gunpowder firearms were basically incredibly unreliable, primitive, inaccurate, and slow, but they'll still put a hole in any suit of armor you'd want to have. And a cannon will bring down any castle wall that exists. With gunpowder, warfare is about to change. Vernacular literature. Okay, what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to tell you that tomorrow we're going to have a quiz. We're going to do these three things: vernacular literature and Constantinople. We actually already have talked about medicine. And after we talk about vernacular literature and medicine, you'll have your quiz. And the quiz will be on what we have covered since starting to talk about the late Middle Ages. Thursday, we'll actually start Renaissance, the rebirth of the ancient knowledge into a Christian context. Yes.
Hi. So I went to the Bible store yesterday, and there was this this kid was probably like 7.
So this isn't a question. Okay. This is a story.
No.
Okay, bear in mind the bell's going to ring fairly soon.
Yeah. There was this kid, and he was talking with honestly, he was like 7. He was talking politics to his mom. Like talking about.
Was he making logical, thoughtful points?
Yeah. And I was like, what? This kid is 7. And he's just like.
It's like me. No, I was like that. In that sense, I had political opinions when I was that young. They weren't great. They weren't very well founded. But I was thinking about it.
Yeah.
So, what was the kid arguing for?
He was basically just saying how, he was talking about how, Biden wants to pass some law with Bible stuff or something like that.
Oh.
And his mom was like, who? He's like, Joe Biden, Mom.
Who's that? He's supposedly the President of the United States. Supposedly. Thank you. Portia, did you have your hand up?
I did.
Okay. Shh. We're not done yet.
Philip the Fourth. Did you talk about him?
He's a French king.
Okay.
I should also mention the Jacquerie. The Jacquerie was a French peasant uprising. Jacquerie.
And then I'm gonna butcher this, but Bonifaz or the 8th.
Anabaptist? What?
Before Philip the Fourth. How do you say that?
Boniface?
Yeah, Boniface.
He's a poet.
Okay.
He's a poet. I believe he was involved with one of
Did he come before Saint Francis?
I don't know.
Okay.
I
I didn't know if it was important or not.
Well, since I don't know, it's probably not important on the test I wrote. Okay. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Is that something,
No.
Shepard? Are you just teasing me? Fine. You can talk quietly amongst yourselves until dismissal. Thank you.